So I left my translation very literal, but if you prefer the NIV, this is correct. Now about the collection for the Lord's people, do what I told the Galatian churches to do. But I prefer the literal translation for now so that you can see how we arrive at this verse. So he told the Galatian churches to do something, and now he's telling the Corinthians to do. And here he's going to explain. Verse 2, let's look at the translation. On the first day of every week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with your income, saving it up so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. So verse 2, let's look at that. Kata plus the accusative. Kata is a Norman standard, preposition of norm and standard. So according to mian, first one, sabatu, genitive of Sabbath, of Saturday, sábado. According to every Saturday, we can translate it, yes, on the first day of every week. Every week, collect, make a collection, each one of you. According to the first, to one Sabbath, on each Sabbath, there you go, on each Sabbath. On each Sabbath, hekastos, each one, humon, of y'all. Genitive, here's the personal pronoun of su, humon, each of y'all. And it says, titheto, here's the present active imperative of tithemi. Tithemi is to put. Right here, we're going to translate a place aside. And he's commanding them to place aside an amount of money from how much they've made throughout the week, to place aside a portion of the money. And so we have here, para heautu, on the side of himself. How do they translate it? Should set aside. Okay. Should set aside. And then, so this is the present active imperative. This is an imperative of an order, set aside. And now we have here a participle, present active participle of thesaurizo. This is from which we get the word thesaurus, tesoro, thesaurizo, saving it up, storing it up. The present tense, this is progressive present, active voice. They produce the action of the verb, and the participle is circumstantial. The participle is circumstantial with the main verb. So storing it up, place it to the side. That's what it's trying to say. So storing it up, saving it up, theosauritson, and then we have a relative, accusative pronoun, setting aside that which, and then we have the indefinite, any. Which any, and I know sounds very literal. We'll smooth it out right now. Setting aside which any, and now we have here a third class condition, if euodotai, and this is the present passive subjunctive of euodo. Euodo. This is a compound word. It's eu, which means good, from such as evangelion, good, eu. And we also have odos, which is road, such as a good road, meaning that you go on your way and fortune falls on you. But we know that there's no such thing as fortune in the plan of God. There's no such thing as fortuna. Oh, fortuna, please bless me. None of that. That is according to how God has prospered you, according to the amount given to you by the Lord on every week. So, setting aside or storing up any or the amount which according to what the Lord has prospered. Yeah, there we go, much better. So we have here, let's go for the NIV, they do it much better. On the first day of every week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money according to what the Lord has prospered, saving it up. Okay, never mind. Never mind. Okay, I'm gonna try work with mine. Okay, on every Sabbath, each one of y'all set aside a portion, saving it according to what the Lord has prospered. There we go. And then now we have a purpose clause, so that hina plus the subjunctive, so that when I come, elto, when I arrive, when I come, so that when I come, whenever I come, yes, hotan, here we have hote, when, plus an, so that whenever I come, Paul did not know when he was going to arrive. Tote, then at that time, so that whenever I come, then at that time, no collection will be made. So we have logeiai. This is again collection, the same word that we saw up here in verse 1, logeia. Logeia, and then ginontai, to become, so that no collection becomes, so that no collection takes place. And so we're going to translate, so that no collection will be made. Why does he want to have the collections ready already? So that at that moment that Paul arrives, say that the collections are not prepared, so that they won't feel like as if they have to give, so that they won't have to give in a moment of pressure, or so that they don't give out of compulsion. Then, if they do give out of compulsion, then that eliminates the whole purpose of grace giving. You feel obliged, you feel like you have to give, and then as a result, your motivation becomes wrong. So what does he tell them? Every week, just set aside a portion of money according to what the Lord has prospered. Set it aside, and whenever I come, then the money's already collected. So you have to give in a moment of tranquility. And so this is a principle right here. Any Christian giving that you give, make sure you give it at the moment, in a moment of peace, in a moment where you can think. Because no Christian giving motivated by compulsion is legitimate in the plan of God. You have to be in the system. You have to use 1 John 1:9 and make sure that you're in the system so that it can become divine good. Any false motivation in Christian giving, any sense of superiority, or feeling worthy, or feeling like you're scoring points with God, that's legalism already, and therefore that does not count. Those are dead works. So let's go over the doctrine of Christian giving. Well, not the doctrine of Christian giving, let's go over Jewish giving. Why? Because we're going to make a distinction between tithes and offerings. You see a lot of Christians today still using the word tithes. Los diezmos y las ofrendas. Offerings, ofrendas is correct. Tithes is wrong. Point 1. Under the Mosaic Law, this is Codex 2 and Codex 3. The tithe was a system of taxes for the whole Jewish nation, both believers and unbelievers. So tithe, diezmo, a tenth, that is for the whole nation, for both believers and unbelievers. This is not Christian giving. This was not believer giving. This was a system of taxation. Now we're going to elaborate. Every year, 2 taxes were levied on the citizens of Israel, both believers and unbelievers. This is not spiritual giving. For the Levites, Leviticus 27, verses 30 to 33, Numbers 18, verses 21 and 24. And for the sacrifices and feasts, Deuteronomy 14, 22 to 24, Deuteronomy 12, 18. So the Levites, who were consistently ministering, and they were in charge of the temples and the sacrifices, always working in that. As a result, there was doctrine being proclaimed at the nation of Israel, both for the believers and for those unbelievers who had to hear the gospel. And so that's how they were maintained, through these system of taxation, the tithes. And now there's a third tax every third year. But every third year, a third tax was exacted for the poor of the land, Deuteronomy 14, 28 to 29. And so this is a tax for the poor. Now, this is not intrusion upon a market, or forcing people to get insurance, or forcing businesses to give. No, this is, you give the money to the poor. So the tax was collected, and then whatever agency, whatever bureau there was, they would give that portion to the poor so that they can make their own decisions on what to buy, how much to spend in this or in that. So the poor were still given the option, given the freedom to use that money. This was not necessarily the welfare system that we have today. Deuteronomy 14, verses 28 to 29. So now, this is tithe, a system of taxation. And what do you often find? You find a lot of Christians nowadays still mentioning the word diezmos, the tithes, and they mention this passage. Where is it? Malachi 3:8. Malachi 3:8. And they always, when they pass out the offering plate and they're encouraging the congregation to give and this and that, they always mention Malachi 3:8 many times, and it says something like this: "Oh, you better give money so that God can prosper you." It says, "Will a mere mortal rob God? Yet you rob me." But you ask, "How are we robbing you?" And tithes and offerings. Here, the issue is tithes. "You are under a curse, your whole nation, because you are robbing me." Now look, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse. The storehouse is the treasury. Bring the taxes into the treasury, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will be not be room enough to store it. And you see all these preachers, "Oh, test the Lord in this. Come on, give to the Lord, and He's gonna watch him open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing." And they use this passage when it is talking about tithes, a system of taxation. Bring the whole tithe into the treasury. Okay. Point 2, now spiritual giving is for believers only, and this is what is known as offerings. In the Old Testament, this spiritual giving was called offerings. Okay, I got ahead of myself. Was called offerings. Tithes and offerings is found in Malachi 3:8. I went ahead of myself again. I mentioned Malachi 3:8. Proverbs 11:24-25. There was a specialized giving. I'll tell you about this later on. It was threefold: the redemption of the firstborn, the Levitical sacrifices, and the doctrine of the fifth. I'll teach you that. I'll have to take some time to teach you that later. Then point 4, the spiritual giving for believers only is described in Deuteronomy 18:1-5 and Nehemiah 13:10. Okay, excuse me.